So Jas, I'm a huge fan of Fintech R&R, and I'm really interested in what's happening in the Middle East with open banking and open finance. So when you did that deep dive with Saudi last year, and then followed it up very recently with a refresh on the KSA approach, I thought I really wanted to have a quick chat with you and to ask you what your thoughts are on the way that they're approaching this.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Yeah, it's I worked in the region a couple of times. So once in 2020 and very recently last year. So the initial deep dive was kind of really a primer because I don't think many know about exactly what's going on in the region. So it's kind of a broad primer, what's going on, what are consumers doing, how do they act, what are some of the stats behind fintech innovation, and where should banks, fintechs, VCs start focusing their attention. And then as part of that deep dive last year, one of the things I outlined that very very lightly touched on was open banking, um, and then this year I thought it does warrant a deeper dive because there are some similarities with what OBIE did in the UK, but there are also some key differences, and I think the key ones are in the approach. OBIE in 20 leading up to 2018 was a look, both AIS and PIS will be available from the start. That's what banks should be ready for. Saudi was a bit different. They were very much look, we're going to start with AIS, but as part of the rollout, they also made it clear that it's not just a pure market-led approach. We'll give you the APIs, you do what you want with it. It was we're going to set all the banks up. AIS will be mandated, but we're also focusing on key use cases. We're not just saying, look, PFM. We're saying PFM. We want SME lending to be a priority. We also want financial literacy and inclusion to be part of one of those pillars of innovation. And really, it's just a way of like getting that message across that lots of people are familiar with the UK open banking. In lots of circles, it's considered the gold standard, but actually the gold standard at one point in time isn't necessarily the gold standard now. Maybe if we time machine back to 2018, brilliant, it looks great, but 7 years
Yeah.
later, it needs to be constantly looked at, reviewed, and improved.
Yeah, totally. And I think smart data is the sort of move to regain that crown, that gold standard. But yeah, I think the use cases is so critical. I mean, the UK was a compliance exercise, a competition remedy. When you look at markets like Brazil, they've the Open Finance Canada initiative came up with some very interesting stats last year that 30% more SMEs have received funding as a result of open finance in Brazil, and it's knocked 2% off the interest rate that they are paying. So it's lovely to see the KSA taking that real sort of opportunity beneficiary sort of approach. Where do you think they're going to go next? Because they've obviously had quite a journey so far.
Yeah.
What do you think is next on the horizon for them?
This is more of an informed review and maybe suggestion as to where they go next. I think they've just released the PIS framework, and they're starting to encourage people to build using that. Banks will do it, fintechs will do it. But I think based on the challenges that the region faces and all of the targets coming from top down through Vision 2030, one of those targets being to establish 525 fintechs in the region by 2030. At the moment, it's around 212. So effectively, it's 50 fintechs every year for the next 5 years. And the kind of the other initiative as part of Vision 2030, which is to increase the number of SMEs in the region, improve access to finance. I think reviewing and modifying the APIs to create some sort of very similar to Brazil approach, improve the lending environment, make whatever fintechs and banks providing lending products, make that available via a dedicated rail using the same protocols. I think that should be the next. Once PIS is established, or there's more fintechs and banks building on PIS using PIS protocols, that should be the next step for me, because it's one of their lofty ambitions. and it's one of the ways that they could spark fintech innovation, help establish more fintechs in the region, like marketplace, SME lending marketplaces, dedicated SME lending fintechs that just use the rail to kind of pull in data from an SME and to kind of just point them in the right direction in terms of a lending option. But it also tackles that goal of, increasing the number of SMEs on the ground, increasing access to finance, transparency with SME finance. So I think that's where they should go next. I don't think there's been any specific murmurings of that's exactly what they're going to look at, but I suspect based on the lofty ambitions and what the rail is capable of, I think that's what they should do after PIS has been established.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking the other day about interoperability. One of the things that's common to the Middle East is that they have a very digitally savvy young population, and we know that they're very mobile and live, work in a variety of different countries and at a variety of different times. So I think that's one of the things that's particularly interesting as a lot of the Middle Eastern countries are looking at creating open finance schemes. We obviously had the UAE with their implementation technically last year, and they have included a lot more in scope than most implementations so far. So they, for example, insurance and pensions right from the get-go are in their open finance capability. So it's really interesting to see how they've developed it technically. I would say I should do a disclaimer at this point because we've helped them, but they've provided the banks with Ozone API from the outset, so the API connectivity just works straight out of the box. We've provided them with the ecosystem, the trust framework, which is already proven for interoperability. So they are very much like KSA. They have this vision of digitally transforming the whole financial sector and beyond. It's not just limited to finance. And they're definitely keeping an eye on how they can allow data to flow for citizens and for the economic migrants who come in to work in the country. Do you have any view on that, or is this just something that you're particularly watching?
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I think maybe that's, again, I mentioned gold standard. I think maybe that's where the UK's framework isn't perfect, and it's why we see, again, I'll use aggregators, TSPs or TPPs, whatever you want to call them, technical service providers like your True Layers and your Tinks. It's why lots of those have been so successful. It's because the APIs haven't been designed in a pure interoperable fashion, and they don't, like you just mentioned, they don't work out the box, whereas a UAE one does across different ASPSPs. So I think it's a really important consideration, and I think it needs, the Saudi model needs to evolve in a way that also works across the MENA region at the very least. And personally, I think it should, because it's one of the more recently developed ones. I think that's where the Middle Eastern players, UAE, Qatar, Oman's come out with a framework documentation I read recently. Saudi, all of those countries should really be, create your own slightly modified version, but they should all work together, because that's really how that region operates. I've worked in Saudi when lots of friends and colleagues who are working in the region would live in Qatar or live in Bahrain, or sometimes commute from UAE to Saudi to UAE. And I think in those situations, you want to create an environment where it encourages, and this is one of the other lofty ambitions of Saudi, is to attract loads of talent. Look, to attract loads of talent, you have to make it easier for them to move around and do what they want. If they want to go to UAE for a weekend and pay using pay by bank with a specific account, it should be easy to transfer money from a Saudi account in Riyadh Bank via account to account rails to a merchant in a Dubai shopping mall. And that's how they should be thinking about it. And this is why I think you're, like yourself, this is not a plug, this is just my personal opinion.
Feel free.
Folks like yourself, I think people who are really experienced in the domain and have expertise should be constantly consulted, because I think some people think open banking is a one and done. like it's a one and done implementation. Look, we've got the framework. Look, there's a cool API. There's an open API. You can go investigate it. You can build directly towards it. But it's an evolving landscape. It's not, as the UK has seen with some stagnation over the past couple of years. You need to be on top of it. You need to have the right advisors team to come up with roadmap 2.0 and 3.0 and getting from open banking to open finance to open data, progressing through those phases. And like you've just suggested with the UAE, maybe even don't start with open banking, actually just start with open finance, because the landscape's moved. Everyone's familiar with how open banking protocols work. Actually create rails that have not just current accounts and SME accounts, but insurance, mortgages, lending products to facilitate SME lending, wealth, invest. All of that stuff should be part of everyone's agenda right now. And it's people who've been through that process before that can, provide that expertise, like yourself, like Barry, like others who have been part of those implementations from day one, seen what's great, helped implement what's great, can retrospectively look back and say, here's what we can do better, and then make sure you take those learnings and implement it in whatever it is going forwards.
Yeah, completely agree. And, brilliant point to end on, because, I would return the favour and say everybody should read Fintech R&R. The way that you make it very accessible and entertaining, but with the core facts in, it's certainly one of my essential reads. So thank you very much, Jas. Lovely to chat to you as always. Looking forward to seeing what happens in the MENA region, and particularly with KSA in 2025.
Me too. Thank you.